Step 3, you want to determine the focus and intended audience for the health promotion effort and what materials will support it. Now step 4, which is understanding the intended audience. Really, once you've made those connections, once you've made the partnerships, really getting to know their beliefs, values, their knowledge about it, who do they think are credible sources, preferred language, preferred mode of getting information. We've talked about all of these. And what motivates them for change. You know, for some people, they want to lose weight because they want to look good. Some people want to lose weight because they know they have a family history of heart disease and they want to live long. People have lots of different motivations. Sometimes it may be that they want to do a behavior because if it's framed in the right way, it can help them feel like they're coming closer to their own cultural values and ideals of the good way to live life. An example of this is we've gotten faith-based organizations involved in health promotion. And when people can identify a healthy behavior with something that is religiously based and helps intensify their faith or their practice, then sometimes that can be a real motivation. There's all kinds of different reasons, but we have to understand what is motivating folks to change. And we have to think about our target audience, who we really want to focus on, so that motivations for, if we're going to work with youth, may be different than their parents or their grandparents. So you might want to do a little checklist again for yourself of assessing the audience before you start thinking about your training. And for each of these following issues, I want you to think to yourself, what do I already know? What do I need to know? How will I learn it? And then once you find out, you want to ask, how does it apply to training objectives and content? And how does it apply to training place, format, and process? So you need to understand the general health beliefs of the people you want to do. You know, what is their concept of what is health? What makes people sick? What makes people well? Then you really need to know specifically what do they believe about your particular topic. We want to know their knowledge and awareness of the topic. How are you going to find that out? What do you find out? What difference does that make when you do your training?
Well, some things that I would do in a diverse community. I think first I do research to find out exactly who I'm talking to and see, if there are any cultural beliefs and traditions that I need to be aware of, because some people get offended. You just come out and start telling them what to do with their baby and how to do it.
If they have a good awareness of it, your training is not going to focus on, here's a problem. Your focus is going to really be on, how are we going to address the problem? But if there's no awareness, that's the first step. Who are their credible sources of information? What language would they prefer? And again, this is going to be maybe different for different groups within the community. So you really are asking these questions about the folks you really want to focus on. And their preferred modes of learning. Do they like to read? Do they like to see pictures? Do they like to see videos? Is a radio announcement? Is something on a bus going to be useful? What's going to be the best way? You really want to decide who as well as what you're going to talk about. So for example, if you're talking about childcare practices, you may want to focus on the moms, the grandmothers of the new mothers, because they're the ones who may be giving advice. And if your advice conflicts with what they're saying, guess who's typically going to be listened to? An example is a nurse in Nebraska was trying to work with young women to get them to take folic acid. It was a group of Mexican-American, newly immigrated young women. There's a very high rate of neurotube defects in that population that relates to both dietary and genetic issues in Mexico. So they really wanted to start before they got pregnant, of course, because they wanted to get their folic acid levels up so they could prevent these kind of things, or at least reduce the risk. So they were having them come in for regular health checkups. They set up a women's health center. They were giving them vitamin pills with folic acid. And guess what? They weren't taking them. Because they would go home and their mothers and their aunts and their grandmothers said, "You're not sick, why are they giving you pills?" So she discovered the health promotion had to start first with that group, and then once they understood how this was going to help their grandchildren or their nieces and nephews, they were on board. Now, once you try something, obviously you always want to get the reaction from your intended audience. Sometimes we actually have the luxury of getting to pilot a training, and then that's the best case scenario. You have a small group, they give you feedback, they say, this was on target, this was not, this was offensive, this was great. Sometimes we can't do that. So that whenever we do training, we always want to get some kind of evaluation and feedback. Now we have to remember that for some people from certain cultural backgrounds, saying something critical to somebody is just not polite and is not done. So you may have to figure out how to be inventive in getting that. You may have to give people opportunities to do it verbally, in writing. If you're working with a cultural broker, that may be a really great way to have them sound out the audience when you're not present to get some information to share back with you. But you do need to check it out. I want to talk now, though, about some aspects that relate to the actual training itself, not the health promotion content, not the values and beliefs that we're trying to change or the behaviors, but actually training itself, because there's issues related to cultural competence to the training per se. Some of these are what I call non-content, you could call them logistic issues. One is really considering the venue. There's, first of all, issues of accessibility. Can people get there? If people have disabilities, can they get in and maneuver? But there's also really important issues around power. If you invite people to where you are, you're in control, you're in power, they may or may not feel comfortable. If you go to them, sometimes it may not be as comfortable for you, but it really gives a very clear message that the community is really in charge. This is really about the community. The other thing is when you pick a venue, you have to think about its meaning to the community. We actually once created a problem for ourselves. We were having trouble finding a venue. We finally found it was a hall run by an organization, a community organization. But we didn't realize that in that community, that particular organization had had some history related to discrimination. And that for some of the people we actually invited to come to our cultural competence training, that venue was really problematic and sent a message that we weren't really being attuned to the history and the culture of that area. So those are things you want to check out. Another thing is understanding the etiquette for hosts and guests. Different cultures, it's very different. And we have our health and our business culture, and so we put out coffee sometimes and that sort of thing, but there's not much ceremony involved, although whenever we have famous speakers, there's a lot of protocol. But for various communities, it would not be appropriate to just walk in and start talking. There may need to be special introductions or exchange of gifts or greetings or whatever. You need to work to understand in a particular community what is appropriate. If you're hosting a meeting or if you're a guest at a meeting of theirs, what are the behaviors that are going to be expected?